Welcome to this episode of Inspirational People. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I get the great opportunity to introduce you and chat with Cheryl Mobley. Cheryl, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. Cheryl and I were recently connected through a mutual friend, Jessica Lalley, and Cheryl has a unique and relevant background specific to the coronavirus crisis we find ourselves facing across the globe. This includes her past work leading a hospital during the Ebola pandemic and her current efforts working with executives to make wise decisions. So, Cheryl, I'll throw it to you. Tell us about who you are and how your story uniquely places you in the current pandemic situation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's always interesting. My mom had this quote that I loved, and I don't know who said it, but it was, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards.
Interesting.
And you look at, when you look back at your life and you see the kind of the threads and how things weave together that at the time you didn't see.
Yeah.
And so I never had a strong interest in healthcare. A lot of the people in my family did hands-on care, in some way, shape, or form. I was the first female that broke that tradition.
Yeah.
Right. And so I didn't do that, but I ended up in healthcare. I ended up doing kind of quality and risk management, which is a really big deal, right, in healthcare, and then ultimately serving as president. And part of that time was when Ebola happened.
And what year was that, if you wouldn't mind reminding us?
2017,
It's
maybe?
about 3 years ago.
Yeah, 4, somewhere, it's somewhere in that neighborhood. I'd have to go back and look. Great question.
I think for most of us that weren't in that, we heard about it, this thing that was happening, but it never really affected us.
It touched, right.
It was kind of a
because
fearful thing, but
Ebola,
it wasn't. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the thing with Ebola was it was much less widely spread because to your point, right now, everybody's impacted.
Yeah.
Whether you're sick or not, you're impacted. Back then, if you were sick or close to somebody that was, or you were caregivers, it was top of mind because the consequences of getting Ebola were really way more severe than this in terms of almost everyone either died or had permanent disability. So I'm not making light of any of the issues were happening now. It was just, but if you got that, you knew it was
the disease itself is more severe. Yeah.
Right. And so at the time, didn't really think about it other than how do we take care of our people? How do we continue to serve? And then you fast forward to now, and it was literally, I was kind of like, there is something relevant I can offer for leaders, because in healthcare, I was thinking about this the other day. I was talking to somebody. You make the decision that you're going to put yourself in harm's way. You just do, whether you're a frontline caregiver or you're an admin like I was, or you're an EMT or a firefighter, police officer, you're in some way, you're going to be supporting people at a time where it could harm you.
Yeah.
And I'm not making light of it. It's just a decision that you made. And so you come at it differently. Doesn't mean you don't want to take precautions. Doesn't mean you don't get scared.
Yeah. And that's a decision each individual has to make, right? It's not
exactly
someone can't make it for somebody else, right?
Exactly. And that to your, oh boy, that was beautiful. So so what I was just thinking about was all the leaders and people who have now been deemed essential who didn't make that decision. Right. They didn't say yes. They said, no, I'm going to go work in a grocery store. And now
I didn't sign up for this. Yeah.
Right. I didn't sign up for this. And so, I've really been kind of noodling on what can I offer those leaders and those teams?
Yeah.
Because now they're in it and they didn't make the decision. So what can we pull forward from the experience of people who did make that decision and having lived through it to support those who were willingly or unwillingly finding themselves in that space? And so it was, at the time, I didn't think anything of it other than, again, how can we keep everybody safe? How do we keep serving? What do we need to do? What stays the same? What needs to change for this period?
Yeah.
And then, flash to today, and I'm going, wow, that was almost a dry run.
Yeah. Yeah.
In some ways. And so how can I bring that forward and help?
And that's also what I've heard and read and seen in terms of this current pandemic is a lot of the countries that are doing better, like a South Korea, it's because they did have a dry run somewhere in the last decade in recent memory that allowed them to prepare for a better response this time. And the United States is happens to be not one of those examples, but kind of talking, you were leading the hospital, you now work with leaders. But you made that quote, and then you said a couple things, and it just made me think of the concept of the difference between like academic theory of what we could or should do versus real experience
Mm-hmm.
facing this reality. And so, tell me a little bit about that difference and how we might be getting it wrong or right in that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the big things is that you as the leader have to remain calm.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean you make light of it. It doesn't mean you say, no, big deal, we got this, right? Or that you ignore it and kind of go, just meet the deadline, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're not remaining calm, you spool your people up
Mm-hmm.
because they need to know, yes, this is uncertain, but we have a path forward. And they
Yes.
have to make the choice, just like healthcare people made the choice to put themselves in harm's way. If people don't choose to follow you, then you're not serving them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have that choice to say, this feels scary, but I believe that we're going to get through this together. Okay, I'm coming with you.
Yeah.
And that is so important. And it falls back. One of the things I think we really miss when we talk about kind of leadership or running a company or whatever is that we talk about leadership as if it exists out there somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? It's only about how I talk to you, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it's only about how I set goals or yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And my perspective is no, leadership starts with you, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's not in you, it can't come out.
Yeah.
And so it's really around what work do you need to do for yourself? Because some of your folks may only, and I mean no disrespect, lead themselves, which is huge.
Yeah.
Some may, on top of that, be expected to lead a team.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless, the first journey is within and starting with yourself and go, how
Yeah.
am I facing this?
Yeah.
How am I choosing to step through this time? And so it's calmness for yourself
Yeah.
so that you then actually have it. The worst thing you can do is act calm and be freaking because everybody
Yeah.
knows you're freaking and now they don't trust you on top of everything else.
Yeah. So
And
how
so
do you
it's
how does a leader get that grounded when they do feel like they're shaking in their boots, and how do they be calm when
when they're
inside
not,
there's a storm
right?
inside, what's your advice there?
You know, and that's a fabulous question. It, to me, it's around, and this is my answer, which may not be everybody's answer, right? For me, it's certainly a faith-based focus
Yeah.
that while I feel like I'm going through something that doesn't feel good, God's not going, I didn't know this was coming. I don't
Yeah.
know how to do this.
Yeah.
And so I accept what are the things that are mine to manage
Yeah.
and what are the things that aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Absent that focus, and even with that focus, it's around taking the time to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
take a pause, and go, okay, what do we know? What do we really know? Not what do we assume, and
Mm-hmm.
not what are we hearing worst case on the media, you know,
Yeah.
that spools you up. And how do you protect your own energy? Like for
Mm-hmm.
me, I don't watch media.
Yeah.
I will read key things that I trust to be more dispassionate and give me the facts. And I also have the ability to use my filter as a president who went through Ebola
Yeah.
to know what's true and what's hype.
Okay.
You know, and so it's really being conscious of what are you taking in
Yeah.
and what's spooling you up, because a lot of us spool ourselves up and tell ourselves we're staying informed. No, you're not. You're staying wound tight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a decision that you make that says, no, I'm not going to take that in, because again,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not in you, it can't come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I
and owning up to the responsibility that you made when you chose to either lead yourself or someone else.
yeah.
You stepped into that choice. So it's
Mhm.
now not just about you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting. I on my blog and in the work that I do, I talk about working smarter and living better, and you're kind of describing what that means. And so, but the other thing that comes to mind is a lot of leaders, at least entrepreneurs, they go into this. They're kind in a lot of ways, entrepreneurs are kind of chasing this goal at the end of at the rainbow. Leadership may or may not be a part of that, but they
Mm-hmm.
end up having to become a leader, at least
Mm-hmm.
if they want to be successful.
Yeah.
And this is a situation where I imagine there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are like, I didn't sign up for this type of leadership.
Mhm.
And that kind of goes back to what you were saying about, making that internal decision. So I guess that has me curious now is, how, is there a difference between staying calm and being overly optimistic, or even in denial. Like I've seen a lot of, people say, oh, this is going to be better, just wait a couple weeks and everything will be fine. Or, oh, there's nothing wrong. Like there's kind of that extreme of like, they should be a little bit more,
they're too cavalier.
Ground there. Yes. So tell me about that and how that applies here and how that can be dangerous or maybe it could be helpful. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. And I think I love that kind of that thought, because to me, calmness is grounded in the reality of the situation. Mm-hmm. It's being able to say that it's okay to say, I'm worried too. I'm scared too.
Yeah.
This is unknown. We don't have all the answers. Things keep changing quickly, but we're going to be okay. We're going to respond. We're making thoughtful decisions. We're taking care of ourselves. We're responding well in this moment.
Yeah.
That to me is still calm.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to, well, there's no problem, because then and you're right. There are people that are going, well, this is all overblown. We should just be doing whatever we want. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into, because I'm not qualified to get into, was this a good thing or a bad thing when you weigh how many people are being impacted and businesses impacted versus the number of cases, which sounds really clinical and it's the number, but each case is a person. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So to me, that denial and that complete, oh, well, this is no big deal, it says to me, I can't trust you because I can't trust your judgment.
Yeah.
And if you choose to use denial to kind of go, la, 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 right? The equivalent of a dog sticking its head under the bed going, well, I can't see you. You can't see me.
Yeah.
Then I don't trust your judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to follow you if I can't trust your judgment. So
yeah.
It's one of those things that be grounded in what you know. When I talk with people a lot, I'm like, we need to kill your assumptions, right? It's kind of my KYA.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's
right?
Good.
Because your assumptions dictate how you respond, and we have to make assumptions, right?
Yeah.
This morning when we first started talking, you were like, hey, how are you? Glad to have you here. I didn't go, well, I wonder if he really means it. I wonder if he meant, well,
Yeah.
I went, I'm just going to make the assumption that you meant it and move on. It's not worth my energy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we create a lot of stories that's only true here, and then we make it true.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's
we apply it to
that
people,
kind of
whether
management.
it's true or not. Yeah. And it's in these types of crises that our assumptions actually get broke down pretty drastically.
Or we feed them.
Or that's a good point.
And think it's true, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we go to what we know, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what is it? Kind of going back to the idea of living better, working smarter. How is that different than now, or should we be doing the things that we should have been doing before this happened? Is it different? Does the crisis change it? Yeah.
So I think the one thing, like when I start working with leaders, the first thing we pay attention to is their clarity.
Yeah.
And let's say you do have a team, even 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people, whatever. I'm like, if I were to ask the leader, what is the most important thing? They may struggle with it right now.
Yeah.
Because the answer is not the same as it was 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if your answer is exactly the same with no nuances, then I'm going to worry about you.
Yeah.
Because you're not responding real time and you may be in denial, right?
Mm.
But at the same time, who you are and how you lead and what you'll stand for has become even more important.
Yeah.
Because this is your opportunity to be consistent, be congruent, and lead forward as opposed to suck back and hide. Mm-hmm. Because it's certainly not the time for that. And so I think the thing that we need to kind of double down on is, what is it that will allow you to serve the most effectively? Mm-hmm. And whether that's prioritizing sleep.
Yeah.
My typical thing is I would normally get up at like 4:30 in the morning and work out. Well, right now I'm not doing that. I'm letting myself sleep till my body wakes up.
Yeah.
And so it's just a different decision that says, in this time, in this space, prioritizing my sleep is really important.
Yeah. Making
sure, as I always should, that I'm really clear about what I need to get done today and why it's important now.
Yeah.
And, you should be thinking about a mix of what are my next 60, 90, 120 days need to be to lead me back into hopefully normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what's going to be our transition back to normal. So it's that mix of now and that you bring forward the things that support you to allow you to support others more deeply, because you're probably at home. And the things you said you couldn't do because you didn't have time.
Now you have time.
Now you have time.
Well, and it's interesting too, because so I've done some stuff. I've been putting some stuff out there to help freelancers, and I've written a book called Path of the Freelancer. And as I was reviewing it, I was like, I wrote this and published it in 2017, but it's still relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is that to be a successful freelancer, you have to be prepared and expecting that there's a crisis around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that creates the proactive activity and behavior to actually be really successful at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that comes to mind when you say all that is just this idea of what just working from home. As a freelancer, I've been doing it for a while, but I have to impose a structure on my work, or
Mm-hmm.
it kind of creates chaos in my life. And this situation, this crisis we're in, it's the same thing, and everyone's at
Mm-hmm.
home, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they don't have that structure that maybe their company or their business gave them, and now they're floundering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so would you, is there anything you would say to speak into that idea?
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of like when a kid first goes to college and they're like,
Okay.
yeah, nobody's telling me what to do. I can stay up all night. I can do this. I can do that. Study classes, what? And hopefully you get to the point where you go, yeah, it felt good for a moment, but it's not feeling good long term. And so
Yeah.
for some people, they realized right away that they
Hmm.
had to create a structure so that at the end of the day, they would feel good about how they spent their time. It just didn't pass in a blur.
Mm,
And for everybody that looks different, but I would agree with you that for most of us, having a structure that works for us that says, and to me, it starts with clarity. What do you want this day to have been about?
yeah.
Because its time is precious. And if we don't know that now, even more so, there are many, many thousands of people that didn't think their life was almost over.
Mm,
And now it is.
yeah.
And some are younger than me, some are my age, some are older than me. They didn't know that was coming. And so to
Mhm.
have the gift of your time and to not waste it,
Yeah.
that's huge. And that kind of does a reset on you. It's like, I don't know if today's my last day.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got a week. I don't know if I've got 30 years, but it's precious and you've been given it for a reason. Use it. And I do
Hmm.
believe that part of the driver for a lot of us is service.
Yeah.
To your point, I put out an offer that I said, hey, I led a hospital through Ebola. If I can help other leaders right now, I'm happy to hop on a call with intact teams and support you in a really candid conversation about what you're dealing with. My
Yeah.
offer. And so when you're serving others, you show up differently.
Yeah.
And so I think really understanding what is it you're here to do? Why is the world going to be better because you breathed your way through it?
Yeah.
And then you choose to make structure
Yeah.
because it's important that you step up into that.
Hmm.
And that to me is the kind of when we talked about kind of a leader starts inside, it's that
Yeah.
approach that it's not about me. It's about what needs to be different because I was here, because I used the things that I was gifted with or the experiences that I've had that at the time didn't seem significant, but
Yeah.
no one else has had them.
Yeah.
No one else has had all of your experience.
Hmm.
So,
So tell us a little bit more about that. When kind of want to shift towards the idea of, okay, how do I as a leader, okay, I'm getting grounded, I'm staying calm. Let's say
mm,
I've worked through that. But now I have people that are looking to me, they're relying on me. How do I help them stay focused? How do I help them work smarter, live better, get sleep, whatever it might be? How do
mhm,
I help lead others? And what might you say even specifically to people that are leading, those that are in the heart of either an economic crisis situation or a health crisis, in New York or these cities that are now the hotspots?
mhm.
How do we lead these people that are looking up to us, wondering what's happening? I don't.
Happening.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to kind of the conversation we had before in terms of being very real
Yeah.
about the impact and at the same time saying, what is the gift in this?
Yeah.
Because there is, for most of us, and I'm not saying for everybody, I mean, if you've lost someone and you couldn't be with them or you're sick, again, not taking away any of that. But for most of us, that's not our experience.
Hmm.
Our experience is we're confined, we're homebound, we couldn't do what we wanted to do, can't get our hair cut, right? Whatever it might be, can't go out and eat. So for most of us, that's the impact. If you have kind of lost your job or the income has gone, and that has happened to millions of people,
Hmm.
it also is a space to go, okay, was I as prepared as I could have been?
Mhm.
To your point, you talked about in your book, it's like you need to expect that something's going to come and disrupt things. And are you prepared? Have you thought about it? And we
Yeah.
talked about this with the other countries who have had kind of a dry run,
Mhm.
had learned from it. So it's
Yeah.
certainly, if nothing else, it's an opportunity to say, I am hopeful that I will have more time on this planet. What am I going to learn from this and how am I going to be different?
Yeah.
So it's taking the gift of that time to self-reflect.
Mhm.
As a leader, it's also being candid about where you sit, where all of you sit, and recognizing everybody's humanity, that people are scared
Yeah.
or they've lost their job and they don't know where the money's coming from. And it's like, really, again, going back to what do I know? What can I do?
Mhm.
Because most of us, even when a situation is difficult, we make it way worse because we spiral in fear and we imagine the worst case. And then we have no energy to do anything positive to pull ourselves up.
Yeah.
And it really is about protecting your energy. I mean, I wish I'm 58, I think. I have to think about it. If I knew now what I knew 20 or 30 years ago, it'd be like, wow.
Yeah.
But I've learned it because of experience.
Mhm.
And that's what makes me kind of more committed to want to share with people. I think,
And you've
certainly,
reflected on it as you stated. Yeah. It's not just that you
absolutely.
went through it, but you've actually taken the lessons from it.
Right. Because you can choose to complain or you
Yeah.
can choose to go, what's the gift in this?
Mhm.
How am I going to be different? How can I serve others better because I've moved through this?
Yeah.
And it's that approach, I think, when you're talking to people, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, from the person who is fine and homebound to the people who've lost their jobs, to the people that are putting their lives on the line without the equipment and the supplies they need.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the learning from that?
Mhm.
And how can you feed yourself and take care of yourself?
Yeah.
And if you lead others, how can you pour into them right now? Which means you as the leader need to find something that's pouring into you.
Yeah.
You can't just keep giving and giving unless you're taking care of yourself,
Mhm.
whether it's sleep or prayer or meditation or eating or exercise or talking to other people, that you can just, if you need to fall apart, you can do that,
Yeah.
so that then you can kind of come back and go, okay,
Yeah.
because you set the
Be the
tone.
leader. Yeah.
Right.
So, as I've seen this play out, I've seen I guess if you kind of think about leadership, there's sort of influencing type of leadership, and then there's authoritative type of
Yes.
leadership, right? And there may be a place for both in this situation, but how do you know which way to go in any particular situation when you're leading in this crisis? Because I do think some people might use the authoritative approach when they shouldn't. They make, the grocery store worker that's scared doesn't
Mm,
want to come into work. You must come into work because it's your job.
mm,
They're forcing them to do something, goes back to, well, they haven't made that decision, you
mm,
reference, right? Or influencing in a situation where, like, if someone doesn't do this thing, then somebody could die. Like,
mm.
there's it's very complex right now. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
about those two dynamics and how relevant they are or aren't.
Wouldn't it be awesome if I just had, if you do this, it's good. And if you don't do that, life's awesome, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we had that kind of playbook? Yeah, I think there is certainly a continuum.
Yeah.
And there's a time when everything is important. When
Hmm.
people are in immediate danger saying, do this now, we're not talking about it, that
Yeah.
is the only effective, safe leadership decision to make.
Yeah.
If we're in a fire situation, it's not a time to go, well, I don't know. Do you think we should use that exit or should we do this? I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think? Well, I don't know. I think it's like, no, go, get out of here right now. That stairwell down, go.
Yeah.
And so to your point, there's times when that's absolutely appropriate.
Yeah.
When you, in addition to kind of being calm, one of the things I know leaders need to be doing right now, and what we did in our hospital, was to really respect everyone's humanity
Hmm.
and respect that outside of the job, they have a whole other life. They're worried about themselves. They're worried about their family. They're worried about, I mean, there's all of that stuff going on.
Yeah.
And you need to step into that and acknowledge that.
Hmm.
At the same time, I think you can say, here's what we are doing. Here's what we are achieving. Here's how we're keeping ourselves safe. At the end of the day, that's your decision to make if you want to come into work or not.
Yeah.
I can't force you. Here's what we're doing. What else would you need? But here's the difference we're making for people. If we were not doing this, let's say grocery store, people wouldn't be able to eat.
Yeah.
I mean, how much more basic and life-saving can it be, even though we didn't sign up for it?
Yeah.
That's a different conversation than you must come or you will lose your job or you will never get another job.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And that's the leader speaking out of fear
Hmm.
and not being willing to go, I know, I get it.
Yeah.
Didn't sign up for this either. I'm scared too, but here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And what other ideas do you have that we can pull in to make us feel and be as safe as we can right now? And how can we celebrate what we're doing? It's too easy to get caught up in, I can't, I won't, I've lost.
Yeah.
And that sucks the life out of you,
Yeah.
even if you're doing something of service. So it's finding a way to laugh together.
Yeah.
It's finding a way to kind of celebrate what you're doing and have fun and get some levity because that fuels you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Did you touch that? I don't, I mean, that just is exhausting.
Yeah.
And it cannot last. It
Yeah.
just cannot last.
So what would you say to the employee or the follower
Mm-hmm.
who is calm, but their leader is driving things out of fear? How can they help their leader calm down?
Well, yeah, it's kind of leading up, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it's going to depend on the nature of the leader.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely lead up, but if the leader is caught up in emotion and fear, it's going to take something to break that connection for them. And maybe it is a group of their employees who are kind of like, we're okay. It's okay. We got this. It's not like you can say, you're really acting out of fear here and you're not helpful. It might feel good and you might want to say that to your friends, but not going to help in the situation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just going to the leader and saying, we so appreciate that you're here and all that we're doing. How can we help you right now?
Yeah.
If they feel like they can do that.
Yeah.
But something that kind of isn't judgmental, but just kind of models
Mm-hmm.
the behavior you wish you were seeing from that leader.
So let's say you are that leader that has been floundering in the initial response. Is it too late to change? Or is that first impression, it's all or nothing?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be horrible if we never had a second or third or eighth chance, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's the time to say, I didn't handle this as good as I could have when this first started. And I want to tell you, I'm sorry about that because we could have moved through this a little bit easier if I'd made some different decisions. But here's what I want to do going forward. And I want to hear from you. What do you really need from me? And what would be the most helpful for you right now? And we're going to shift how we're facing this. We're going to shift how we think about it. It's never too late.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying if you've been horrible to people and everything else, you're probably done.
Yeah.
Because if you will come here and you will like it and I don't care about you. Well, yeah, then I've now cut you mentally out of my, out of my life. But absent that, if you've just, been floundering or been a little bit, more panicky than was ideal, I think if you acknowledge it, apologize for it, set the path forward, and then say to people, if you see me slipping, let me know right away.
Yeah. Accountability.
Yeah. And so just flag it for me in case I miss it so that also brings people together with a shared focus because that's huge right now. It's like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What's the point? What's the service that we're offering? What's better because we're choosing to do this?
Yeah.
Makes us all step up a little bit more. We all feel good when we see the stories of people reaching out to help each other as opposed to somebody going in and stealing restaurant equipment because the restaurants have some stuff outside because they're trying to still serve people.
Yeah.
We see right now the best of us and the worst of us.
Yeah.
But that's our choice.
Yeah. So you've, in the experiences you've had, the stories that you've gone through and that you've shared, you've learned a lot. What are some stories that have impacted you or some, whether fictional or real, or experiences, what stories impacted the trajectory of your journey?
Yeah, I'll go back to the hospital because we had, and I say past tense only because I'm not still there, not because they're not still there and not being amazing, but when people trust you to provide care for them, it's huge.
Yeah.
Because it's a helpless time. Nobody says, yes, I want to be in the hospital for a month. Yes. All right. I mean, nobody does that. And it disrupts everybody, the person and their family and their friends. And so one of the things that you guard against very heavily is you don't want anyone to be worse off as a result of coming to your hospital than they were before.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we talk about are kind of healthcare acquired or associated infections, meaning you didn't have it when you came in and you got it as a result of being under our care. You don't want that. And that's certainly a lot of what you're seeing happening as well here.
And as a patient or as a medical care person.
As a patient, you don't want
Okay.
the patient to be exposed to, because when you come into a hospital, like we're hearing with COVID,
Yeah.
you're more likely to have bad outcomes if you've got other
Mm-hmm.
conditions
Mm,
that make you more susceptible. So anybody in a hospital is already more
yeah.
susceptible. And so
Yeah.
we were top performing in the country for one particular type of infection, but we weren't at zero.
Yeah.
And to me, anything other than zero is just not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the CDC had what they called a bundle. And it was like, you need to do these 7 things. And if you do these 7 things in this order every time, you won't have any infections.
Mm,
And so what you do is that you measure your performance, you do audits to see how
okay.
you're doing.
Yeah.
And our audits were saying, and you're not auditing every single thing, right? You're doing a sampling. And our audits were saying that our folks were doing what they should be doing 100% of the time.
Okay.
But we still had some infections.
Mm,
And I said, okay, either one of 2 things is true. Either we're not flawless 100% of the time, or we are flawless 100% of the time, and there's something else in play that is causing these infections, even though we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing.
yeah.
And so I said, I'm going to, I appointed kind of 2 people. I said, y'all pull together the team that you need. And I want we're going to have to continue to do everything we're required to do.
Yeah.
But I want you to start investigating and come up with some things we can do to get to zero. And you
Mm,
let me know what you need. If you need people that don't want to play, or you need supplies, support, whatever you need, you let me know. But this is your baby. This is our goal.
yeah.
And they did. They
Yeah.
came up with practices that got us to zero.
Mm,
And then I bragged on them. I spread what they did, because
yeah.
our hospital was part of a larger system. So it was like at the time, 14 or 15 other hospitals.
Yeah.
And so I shared throughout the system what they had done, what they had created. And we saw when we did that, we were at zero. If we fell off the wagon, we would see infections creep back up.
Yeah.
And I am still to this day so proud of what they came up with, but it was around, as a leader, setting a really high standard
Mm-hmm.
and saying, y'all are the ones that know how to do this.
Yeah.
Right. You are the ones who have the expertise. I don't, right?
Yeah.
My healthcare experience is taking care of my horses. Okay. It's
Yeah.
not around humans. So y'all know, here's our standard, go get it done
Yeah.
and let me know what you need. And then I got out of the way.
So what informed you to approach this that way at that time? I mean, because a lot of leaders would have done it very differently, but you did it that way. What informed you?
Number one, I have a hideously high standard.
Yeah.
I mean, and I will at the same time say, as long as we breathe, we will make mistakes.
Yeah.
So none of us can have this halo complex, because it's not real. But you constantly evaluate, what can we do differently? What can we do better in pursuit of that?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was knowing I don't have anything to offer them.
Yeah.
I don't know what they need to do. I just know that, to me as a leader, it is completely and utterly unacceptable that we're not at zero.
Yeah.
And the only way to get there is to honor the knowledge of the people that can get us to zero.
Yeah.
But it rests on the back of all the time honoring their expertise and their perspective over mine.
Yeah.
Right? It comes on the heels of saying, here's what we need to do. Now y'all need to decide how. And if you have a really difference of opinion, or you think this is the wrong direction, you let me know.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I'm going to own the responsibility for making the decision, usually.
Yeah.
Not always, but usually. But if it's something I can give to you as a decision to make, then I'm giving you that. So this was an extension.
Yeah.
And I think it comes into your question earlier about, kind of being autocratic and commanding.
Yeah.
If you think you've got all the answers, then that's the way you show up.
Yeah.
Now,
But
sometimes you need to.
Yeah. So tell me, what leads you to recognize that you don't have all the answers?
Living more than a couple years. Yeah, it's about being self-reflective.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, some of us are more wired to go, yeah, I got this,
Yeah.
and not think about what they don't have.
Yeah.
And some are wired to never value anything they have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to find that spot. And one of the ways I have found helps me
Mm-hmm.
is to go, let's say I was talking to you, Jason, and you were telling me what I've told you. How would I respond to that if it weren't me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you were saying, well, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this, I'd be like, wow, that is amazing. Versus, let's say if it's me, I'm going, yeah, right. Really? So it's pulling it away from you can help kind of a third party perspective.
Yeah.
It's having the humility to recognize you don't ever have all the answers. You
Yeah.
don't ever hold all the truth. If you did, you could do everything all by your own self and never need another human. And that's not the way we were wired. And that's not the way really awesome things happen.
So is this a time that is a humbling experience, especially for those that are more resistant to what you're describing?
That's a great question. I don't know how people are going to handle it. You can hope.
Yeah.
But people have said to me, well, do you think we're going to be different? Do you think we're not? And I'm like, well, I hope we are.
Yeah.
I hope we take something good from this.
Yeah.
And not just it was horrible or whining or I couldn't or this or I lost this.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything we move through should impact us. And I don't mean for ill. We should actively learn from it, examine it, reflect on it, and go, how can I serve more? And what do I need to learn from this? Because there's always something. And to me, the saddest thing is if you don't learn anything.
Yeah.
Or if you look back on this time and go, yeah, I sat on the couch and, watch TV all the time. Really? You won't get this time back.
Yeah. It's something we might regret, which may be a lesson learned in its own right, but it would hopefully be not the lesson that could have been. So we talked a little bit about stories. Let's shift over to systems. What does systems mean to you? How does that apply when you're a leader or even a follower? And do they matter now? Are they more important now or less important? How do we lean into systems in this current situation?
To me, I was working with somebody once, her name is Christine, and she made a great comment. She goes, when you feel stress, it's usually because there's not a system.
Interesting.
And I was like, yeah. Now, does everything need a system? No. But for me personally, a system is just a repeatable process that I don't have to use mental energy around.
Yeah.
And because
you kind of pre-thought it, so you can just do it.
Exactly. You're not going, I don't know, should I do this or not? It's like, well, yeah, you just brush and floss your teeth. I mean, hello.
Well, it's
you don't need to make the decision about this. You just do it.
Exactly. I don't know if you've ever heard of the red, yellow, green system before, but in freelancing, I use that concept where based on how my income is, I have 3 sets of actions, a red, yellow, green, and I respond, and I've already thought out what my plan is for those 3 scenarios. So when they happen, I just do them. I don't have to think
about it. Exactly. And I actually had a client I was talking to because he's like, well, I'm spending all this time. And for him, every time he had to travel, he would spend tons of time trying to figure out where he was going to stay.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And I'm
so he's
like,
spending a lot of,
wasting time. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, you need to pre-decide, right? Exactly your point. What are you going to do when you're going to go somewhere? Are you going to go for a certain hotel chain, a certain level, whatever, just pre-decide. And then you now you don't waste your mental energy and your precious resources on that.
Yeah.
And so it is, to your point, it's like being really clear about what's important and your systems support that.
Yeah.
And it's really, to me, it's not so much necessarily a huge complex thing, although it could be.
Yeah.
But it's just, what is it that frees you up to say, this is just what I do. I don't think about it. Yeah. It just happens. And right now, back to your kind of earlier comment about having some structure, if you're not used to controlling your own time, which is what it is.
Yeah.
I know when I first transitioned from being a hospital president to running my own company, I was like, oh, I get to control my own time. How cool is this? Because I couldn't do that before.
Yeah.
And if I want to work at 9:00 at night, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because it's beautiful outside and I want to get outside for an hour, I can do that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my system when I first shifted, was what's important to me is what I get done today.
Yeah.
And that I do it in a way that takes care of me and fills me up and not, tush must be in chair from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Because then you're losing the gift of being able to control your own time. But I think systems now are even more important.
Yeah.
And for some, they're having to make up their own.
Yeah.
And it may be, what can be really helpful. We hear a lot about morning routines. Probably in the last, 5-10 years, never really talked about it much before.
Yeah.
But I was listening to somebody and he had a statement, again, this is brilliant. He says, your morning routine sinks or swims on your evening routine. And I'm like, I thought about it and I thought, you're right. because I tend to be wired more at the end of the day. I make sure my desk is clean and then I've listed what I need, what my priorities are, my mission critical things are for the next day.
Mhm.
And so I can kind of let that go and transition, into the next morning. Now, if something has changed, okay.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of a system that says, really be clear about what you need to achieve and why.
Yeah.
And then you're freed up to kind of move forward and go, what will support that? So if I'm like, okay, these are the 3 priorities I have to get done today, then I've created kind of a system around that.
Hmm.
If I'm going
Yeah.
to go out and weed in the middle of the day because I'm on the computer from 7 in the morning till 9 at night with a little break, I'm going to go take care of myself and manage that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're hugely, hugely important right now. And the other thing I will share, and I wish I got money every time I referred these people because I don't. But there's a tool I stumbled on probably about 2 months ago,
Yeah.
and it's AYOA, and it's a
Okay.
website, and it's a fun visual way of kind of tracking projects or things like that. And
Yeah.
I'm a really visual person, so it kind of jazzes me. It's way more fun than a list.
Yeah.
And something like that can be helpful for people, to go look at it, play with it, and see if that helps you have fun while you're planning, and how you kind of
Yeah.
shift
Make it
that
a
and make it
game in
up.
a way.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's neat. So, so let's, we're kind of closing out the conversation here. And so what I want to ask you is, life can be, unfair. It can be challenging. We might feel that more now than ever, but there are also contrasting moments of seasons of joy and
Hmm.
prosperity. So as people traverse this journey we call life, what are your parting words of wisdom to those that are listening in or watching?
I really think it's around searching hard for the gift in everything that you go through.
Mm-hmm.
So
No
that
matter,
no experience is wasted, no
yeah.
crisis is wasted, and understanding that's when we usually grow, most of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier for us often to think, to think in concrete things. So like if anybody who's ever started working out,
Yeah.
you only progress because you push past what's comfortable.
Yeah.
If you continue to do what you can always do, you don't get better, stronger, faster, more aerobically fit. You just don't.
Yeah.
And this kind of growth is the same.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to be uncomfortable, and if you're not willing to say, what can I control? What do I own here? What can I learn here? Then you're wasting the experience. Then it has just
Mm,
been negative and bad.
yeah.
But it really, the way you came into it is you have a choice. You absolutely have a choice. Are you going to find something you can be grateful for?
Mm-hmm.
And there's many things that we can all be grateful for. Or are you going to go, this is unfair, this shouldn't have happened, this is wrong, da-da-da. I mean, what energy do any of us want to move through life with?
Yeah.
It really is your choice. And that's, if I had known that before, my life would have been
Yeah.
different than it's been.
Well, what leads us to think that it's not our choice, that because you're describing a victim versus a victor, the two
Mhm.
kind of sides. What's going on there?
I think on the worst of us side, it's about not being responsible.
Mm-hmm.
It's about not having to say, I made this choice, my behaviors got me here. And you see it a lot. Well, it all the way back to the grade school joke, well, the dog ate my homework.
Yeah.
It's always out there.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that you blame others, you're giving away your power to change and improve.
Yeah.
And it's easier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ultimately it's not easier, but in that moment, it feels easier to blame somebody else as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to, I didn't plan well enough and I got caught up in traffic and that's why I'm late.
Yeah.
Completely different conversation that reflects, how you think about yourself. And
Yeah.
then I think for a lot of us, we didn't really learn to think that way. We
Mm-hmm.
see what other people do. And unfortunately, a lot of what we see is people blaming others outside of them. And
Yeah.
we've never investigated to see if there's another way to approach the world.
Yeah.
And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you realize
Yeah.
I have a choice versus I don't, you're like, oh, that kind of puts it back on me, huh? Yeah.
Well, and there is an aspect of it that, you know, um, I think and it's almost like a blind hope that by complaining about it or blaming elsewhere, something or somebody will magically give us what we want.
Mm-hmm. And it
And
may have
that
worked when we were 2, right?
maybe that's it. It's when we were a child. Maybe that's where we learned it.
Yeah, no, well, it's the squeaky wheel gets it. The crying baby is designed to be annoying, so it gets attention. You're right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, really good point. Learned
yeah,
response.
yeah. So I remember kind of think of the idea of like waiting to be rescued, right? And I
Mhm.
ended up in my business. I had a marketing company from 2007 to 2014, and a couple of years into it, probably similar to that mentality. But I was waiting for rescue. I
Mm,
need to find the right project manager, the salesperson, or whoever is going
mm,
to fix the company and take us to the promised land, you know?
mhm, yep.
And it just, one failure after the next. It's like nobody ever fulfilled that vision, right?
It is.
So I ended up meeting this guy. He ended up writing a book called The Fourth Fisherman, and
Mm,
the story was about these 5 Mexican fishermen that were stranded at sea for 9 months, and
mm,
three of them lived and 2 of them died.
mm.
And when I met him, I said, well, why did 3 live and 2
Yeah, yeah.
die?
I want them all.
And he said, well, the 2 that died, they waited for rescue and they didn't do what they could each day to survive. They just sat in
Mm,
the boat and just hoped for a boat to come
right.
get them. And the other
Mhm,
3 did what they could.
mhm,
They caught turtles and they drank their blood and they drank their
mhm.
own urine if they had
Yeah.
to. They happened to have a Bible and they read that to each other. But the other 2, they almost isolated themselves to a different part of the boat and they just died.
Mhm.
And I realized when he shared that with me that like that's what I was doing in my business is I was waiting for
Mm.
rescue and I needed to go join the other 3
Yeah.
or I was going to die. And
Yeah.
so I started to shift. So
Mhm.
it's a powerful dynamic that we can get pulled into. So what else? What else would you say? Is there anything you wanted to share that you haven't? Anything about the experience you had at the hospital or the work that you do with executive leaders now that would be worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, you've asked so many great questions and the conversation has been great. So I think for me, it really is when you think about creating a business that has an amazing impact, hopefully that's beyond the dollars it puts in your pocket.
Yeah,
In our society and our culture in this time, the revenue is a reflection of the service you provide, how well your messaging aligns with people, right? You can have something that's fabulous, but if people don't know about it
yeah,
and they can't use it, then it's not being of service. So then how do you go back and go, okay, where is it breaking down? What do I need to
yeah.
adjust? It's that
Hmm.
constant kind of, if I'm not getting the outcome I want, the first question is, what do I need to do differently? What's working? What's not working?
Okay.
So it's that immediate kind of reflection again back to the sense of what do you control?
Hmm.
You can't control everything. I can't say, I will open all the restaurants right now. Well, yeah, that's nice. And maybe
Yeah.
your magic fairy dust is good for you. So I think it really comes back to that internal perspective. I mean, when I work with leaders, I work with leaders who, regardless of the size of their company, want the 99th percentile performance that we had in our hospital. Want that excellence on all fronts and understand that illogically as it may be, you don't get there by focusing on the bottom line,
Yeah.
right? You get there by having clarity.
Hmm.
You get there by making sure everyone on your team has clarity, which to one of your earlier questions is even more important now than ever.
Yeah.
Because what was important a month ago is not what's vital now. And if you haven't narrowed down and crystallized, like you were talking about, kind of the pre-decisions you made with your red,
Yeah.
yellow, green, if this happens, I just move to this behavior.
Yeah.
Where some leaders have done an amazing job of going, if we hit and when we hit the next crisis, because some people will say it's about every 10 years you can count on something.
Yeah.
Nobody really thought this was going to be it, but every 10 years there's something that tests you in your business. So how are you going to respond?
Yeah.
It's that focus of clarity now, and then making sure, back to the structure conversation, that your calendar reflects it.
Yeah.
Because I'll say to a lot of my folks, if you tell me this is important and I peek over your shoulder and I look at your calendar, is that what you're doing? And for most of us, it's not.
Yeah.
It just isn't, right? Are you trustworthy? How are you showing
Hmm.
up, right? And to me, that's the crux of communication.
Yeah.
Because if I don't trust you, the more you say to me, the less I trust you, right?
Yeah.
You've made it worse.
Yeah.
So all the way around, really that focus is, what are the things you need to do to show up
Hmm.
to really be an amazing service to whatever it is you've decided you're here to do.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of shift that for me is so important, that you don't get to a positive bottom line by just focusing on the bottom line. That's an outcome,
Hmm.
right, of doing everything else. So it really is around starting with you,
Yeah.
and turning a candid lens, not one that's overly positive or overly negative.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of what I have brought. Like I said, if I knew what I knew 20, 30 years ago, what I know now would be like, oh, I would have been such a better leader, right?
Yeah.
I would have helped people develop more. I would have done this, I would have done that. But the piece is going, but I'm learning it now because I've chosen to keep learning. And then how do I share it so I can short circuit and accelerate somebody else's journey?
Yeah.
Because there's many people coming behind me that have so many things that they're positioned to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Um,
No, it's been great.
I think it's a good place to close out here.
Close
So
out.
so tell us, how can people connect with you? What are you doing now? How can people work with you? What's going on in your world,
Yeah.
and how can we get connected?
Well, great. So, I mean, LinkedIn, certainly, I know you'll be sharing that. People can absolutely just reach out directly
Yeah,
to me via email, no problem. What I'm doing right now is like we've been talking about is I've pivoted a bit to go, what is it out of my experience that I can help people the most with right now?
yeah,
Not necessarily what I was doing 3 months ago, not what I'll be necessarily doing when we get to some sort of new normal, but for now, really trying to offer things that will deal with the new problems people are having, which are around virtual teams, right?
yeah.
If you're a leader, what are you probably not doing well if you've never led remote teams,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
How are you showing up if you didn't sign up for this, but now you're in it?
Hmm.
And so offering everything from little 20-minute snippets where I work with people kind of online in a little, kind of webinar type setting, because nobody wants a 2-hour thing right now.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like, give me a quick nugget I can go do something with and then leave, or 45-minute virtual, or working with teams or leaders now,
yeah,
kind of virtually. So all of those things are possible right now. It's really around how can I take what we've learned
yeah,
and be of service in the best way right now. And
yeah,
so I'm open to whatever that looks like because everybody has different needs,
yeah.
so
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl, and I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your
yeah.
thoughts and wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. And I forgot to mention that you'll be including some information about kind of just a free gift that
Yes.
kind of expands on what we talked about. That'll be a link people can go pull, and just have that as an additional resource. It'll dive a little deeper into some of the things that we talked about.
Yes. Yes. I'll put a link to that, your LinkedIn, everything else, and we'll get that to whoever's interested, and we'll go
Good.
from there. So,
Fabulous. Well, thank you for all that you do, because this is a great service, and for the wisdom that you shared, because I learned some great ideas from you today. So thank
well,
you.
I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you. You as well. Take care.